Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Investor News. We are joined today by Brian Leeners, who's the CEO and director of Homerun Resources, which is listed on the Venture Exchange. HMR is a symbol, and for those of you NASDAQ oriented, it's HMRFF on the QB. And we're thrilled to have Brian here today. We've got a lot to get through, a lot to unpack, and a lot of bases to cover. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you for the invite, and it's great to sit down with you, Darren.
Likewise. I always like to kind of start with kind of finding out the people behind the company, and we'll start with the big boss. How does a kid that goes to UBC, becomes a lawyer, becomes an investment banker and capital markets guy, end up with a burgeoning Canadian success story in Brazil? You want to just give a little quick timeline on your history?
Yeah, if you want to go way back, it comes to a serious problem with playing with Lego. And I'm going to date myself here, but I think you'll understand. I used to read the encyclopedia from beginning to end when it would show up at our door on a monthly basis. So, what I'm trying to say is I'm a nerd. I've been working in both the technology sector and the material sector for 30 years. So you'll see a blend of those within my career path. We've done a lot of work in the material side. We started to look at the energy transition as a pull on materials multiple years ago. We started to look at energy as a bottleneck relative to global growth around the same time. So the idea behind Homerun is really to deal with those two big issues, right? Which is, what are the materials that are most important to allowing all of us to move to electrification, which is a path that is unfettered. It may be politically faster or slower depending on the region that you live in, but it is unfettered. And so from that perspective, there are key materials within that. It's interesting that we focused on silica because it's not really recognized as one of those, but it's actually a key material in both the technology side and in the energy side. So yeah, originally a focused young man relative to learning things, and I've been a materials and tech nerd my whole life.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't quickly talk about the name of the company. It's an unusual name, but an interesting name. And of all days, the MLB season arguably starts this afternoon. Tell us how the name became, as we know it today, significance behind it. And did you have any part in that, or did you join up as it was Homerun?
I had a part in that, and go Blue Jays. And the part that we were looking at was we wanted to name the company based on what we wanted to achieve. We didn't want it specific to any material. We're not Homerun Gold and da. We wanted to name it after what we wanted to achieve, and our strategic model is designed around a vertically integrated strategy. But Darren, what we've done is within each one of those verticals, we've tried to design a complementary unicorn. And a unicorn, for those who are not familiar, is in the US terms, it's a company that achieves $1 billion US valuation. So that's really been sort of our end strategy, is to do that within the context of one company utilizing that core advantage based on our silica, and then extracting that into those verticals and trying to turn those verticals into individual but complementary unicorns.
It's a great name, and it's catchy, and it's certainly better than Pop Up or Ground Out or something. Homerun Resources is awesome. So a couple of things. I don't know if we start with Brazil first or silica. I'd like to start with Brazil. How does Brazil get on the radar, and give our audience a little bit of an idea of the advantages that you guys have in Brazil, be it the coastal geographics, the labor force, government, the rest of it? Because I think that's really important for people to know.
Yeah, it's exceptionally important. And so if you look at Brazil, Brazil is a lot like Canada in the sense that it has a massive endowment of high quality critical elements. And so I make the joke once in a while. I call it the Chinese buffet, of critical elements, but it's a political joke if people get what I'm talking about. So Brazil has been the center point of the material strategy, or one of the center points of the material strategy of the Chinese for the last 20 years. It used to be a center point for the Europeans and the Americans, but they kind of forgot about Latin America and went elsewhere. And so what's happening now is the United States and Europe, because of the friction between China and those two regions, are now looking for, repositioned, more secure, friendly supply chains. And when you go around the world and you look for that, and you look for that buffet style, you've got Canada, you've got Australia, and you've got Brazil. And so Brazil represents sort of, and when you compare it to Canada and Australia, it's the low capex, low opex opportunity. When you look at the nature of the resources, they're comparable to Australia. So in Brazil, Mother Nature has done your first sequence of mining for you, in the sense that it's created material that's easily mined down to a particular depth. In Canada, everything is hard rock, hard rock, hard rock, hard rock. In Australia, you have the combination of those two. But again, now you're looking at costs, OPEX and CAPEX. From a political perspective, the current leadership, and I think this will continue because it's beneficial to the entirety of the country, has been focused on positioning Brazil as that buffet of critical elements, but within the context of making sure that they're not just the guys sending the lettuce to the restaurant, they're actually making the meals. And so from that perspective, Brazil is interested in repopulating its industrial capabilities within those industries. And if you look, probably going to be the leader outside of China in rare earths, probably going to be the leader outside of China in graphite, probably going to be the leader, well, we'll be the leader outside of China in silica, because we're going to make that happen. And so when you start to look at that, battery input materials, and then you look at the economy in Brazil, and you look at the recent developments of that economy with players like BYD from China coming in early and starting to build that vertically integrated model, which you can do in Brazil and you can't do in certain other countries. And we met with the US senior government people from the US last week. And it was the most aggressive I've ever seen a government group relative to, we have a checkbook and we're ready to participate with private enterprise in Brazil in order to build supply lines for the United States of America in critical materials. Like, that literally was everything that they were saying. And we were talking with those senior officials about those items. So it's the right place, right time. Hopefully the politics stays closer to central than the two polars, because it has a political base somewhat like the United States, where you've got sort of a right wing and a left wing and not much in between. But right now it's being run in a very central style. And I think that will continue relative to the development of the country. Large national economy, large population base, well over 200 million people. So it has all the potential to be a major superpower.
The star of the show was Silica. Spend a couple of minutes and tell our listeners that don't know much about it, what is silica? Why do we care? Why is it important? And how did you get attracted to it in Homerun itself, specifically in Brazil?
That's a great question, Darren. And what we did, I've been in the copper space for a while. So copper is very comparative to silica. The differentiation is that copper has one quality in the marketplace and one price in the marketplace. And 99.99 cathode. And silica has a variety of different qualities, and a variety of different price points. Those qualities determine, really, if you look at it, it's a pyramid. At the bottom, you're talking about the sand that goes into your golf course bunker and your child's sandbox. And at the top, you're talking about the silica that goes into photonics, and the creation of things like silicon. So it is, and the way it's the copper argument, right? Remove copper from your life, you will feel it miserably. Remove silica from your life, you will feel it miserably. Most technologies that we use today are dependent on silica. Most energy elements, especially the alternative energy elements like wind and solar, have huge components of silica. Solar in particular is non-existent without silica because both the silicon and the glass, the two biggest components, are made from silica. So it is a key element. It's never on the list as silica. It's always on the list as silicon or some derivative thereof. But it is a key element within the critical elements. Brazil has historically been a producer of silica to the world. China's the dominant player in both use and supply. And now what we're seeing is the opportunity in Brazil with our large resource and unique quality resource in Brazil. We're looking at having a resource that has hundreds of millions of tons that can service that high end of the pyramid, which is our focus.
The next couple of things sort of tie in together, but you brought up a little bit about the Brazilian government. I'd have to look at my notes for this one, but in terms of a carbon footprint and silica, in terms of a processing and pioneering, you guys want zero waste purification technologies. The government wants environmental, more interest in the environmental world and the carbon world. We'll tie in UCal Davis in a sec, but can you tell us a little bit about the carbon world as it pertains to Homerun in Brazil and how the government sort of feels about things and what you guys are doing about that?
Yeah, I mean, Brazil, if you look at the mining regulations in particular, as an example in Brazil, the environmental standards are really high in Brazil.
Yeah.
And they take pride in that. You know, the Brazilians, there's been some very well publicized negativity coming out of Brazil relative to illegal deforestation and illegal mining and illegal farming. And so from that perspective, that gets all the headlines. But if you're a legitimate resource company in Brazil, you know, you are up against, you know, a very high standard of environmental approval equivalent to, you know, what you see in Canada, the United States, or Europe. So it's not that they're undercutting standards. Their standards are high. Their ability to move forward in that environment is quicker than those other areas. And it
Right.
doesn't relate to much more than they've tried to remove the fat. And Goiás, one of the states, has gone from, I think they used to have an 8 year timeline on average to approve a resource project to production, and now it's 3, right? So when you compare that to 10 to 15 years in the United States, Europe, and Canada, there's another reason to do business in Brazil. The government itself is adamant that it maintains that high standard of environmental quality across the food chain. So it's proper for companies to look for the best ways to produce their product. But we have to do that also within the context of it being economic. And so what we've looked at is, okay, what are the things that we can do through the entirety of our food chain in order to do that? What can we do at the site? What can we do relative to how we process our material? What can we do relative to how we manufacture the products that we're going to make? And we've applied that across everything. So and that's a mandate that I have. You know, being
Great.
Canadian and having grown up in Vancouver, I appreciate the beauty of nature and preserving that beauty. And Brazil is a very beautiful country.
I think it's important for our listeners and viewers to hear you talk for a second about the UCal Davis. It's a school, we talked this earlier, but you don't hear a lot about it. It's not the Cal, the Stanford, the Berkeleys of Northern California, but it's Sierra Magazine listed, I think, as the eighth best green renewable university on the continent. And your relationship with them, hats off to Homerun. How did that start and how's that going? And how did you pick them, just for what they are and what they do, or who got that introduction? How's that going?
Yeah, I found them. I found their materials lab. I found them through Dr. Subash, who heads that. He was actually pulled out of retirement, quasi-retirement, by UC Davis to head up that materials lab. We have a unique relationship with the university relative to that materials lab. So, and the relationship's literally like it's our R&D lab.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we had to build that lab, it would cost us millions of dollars. The lab's already built. They have a very good relationship with Berkeley, for instance, and Stanford. So they're in that area of California where, you know, some
Totally.
of the top schools in the world exist. The talent that's in their materials lab is exceptional. We have two women that are working for us relative to one's getting her master's, the other one has her master's, and will actually be going to Stanford to get her PhD. They're brilliant. I mean, I feel intensely inferior when I'm talking with them, but it's cool to see young minds with passion relative to what we're trying to do. And because they're young, they have this whole preservation of the environment is built, it's in their blood, right? It's not something they're learning, it's just literally in their DNA. So they've come up with some novel ideas. The ideas that we've worked on so far have been, me going there and saying, hey, do you have a technique that can do this? And then me learning about something and saying, hey, I've learned about this. Can you guys test that for us? And so that's creating our IP. We filed one patent already. There'll be more coming. And we're building a large IP portfolio around the company, which I think is really key as a technology and material focused company. Subash is amazing. He's got decades of experience in doing exactly what we need to do. So our conversations are like these little WhatsApp things. Hey, Subash, I just saw this. Can we do this? And immediate answer back, yeah, Brian, we could do that. 20 years ago, I was working at so-and-so, and that's exactly what we did, but we just modernized that using this piece of equipment. So bringing his knowledge and the passion and intelligence of his students into that lab, and we've had success, right? So if you look at the cost of that success, it's been minimal relative to what we're doing. And the intentional focus is, and this goes back to your previous question, it's, the process to get from silica to fused silica glass, for instance, is a 5 to 10 step process depending on where you start. And it's extremely hydrocarbon intensive, extremely CO2 negative footprint, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're looking at it and going, okay, how do we purify our silica using electricity? How do we process our silica into new materials using electricity? And how do we hybrid our silica with other materials to produce new advanced materials using electricity? And we've had a lot of success in that. And now we're at that stage where we have to take that bench scale success and start to look at how we scale that relative to commercialization of those solutions. And we're in that phase right now.
So we can maybe jump ahead for a second. We'll go maybe into that thing. Financing side of things, you've raised $9 million plus the last little while, which is terrific. That gets you, I'm sure, caught up and into through 2026. That gets us through 2026, but that's sort of like a bridge thing. We're going to need a lot more to kind of keep this ball going. How do we get that governmental stuff, private money, Brazil government, U.S. government? Where does that come from? And how does the 9 million sort of get spent right now in terms of what you need and what is needed going forward?
Great question. The 9 million is really operating capital relative to what we're doing on a daily basis. For instance, we're funding the BFS for the solar glass plant. The large CapEx fundings are project based. And so, as I stated earlier, we've designed the company to be these independent but connected verticals. We have individual management teams sitting on top of each of those verticals who are incredibly skilled within the domain of the vertical. And so what we're doing is we've built a business model on the top, but we've also built business models and strategies within each of those verticals. So, we've made acquisitions in our energy solutions side, both with, the IP that we've bought from NREL for the thermal energy storage and the acquisition that we made of the perovskite company in Europe called Halicel. So within the solar glass, which is one of the materials verticals, we've designed that financing to be project based. You know what that means, but for the folks who don't, is the financing is related to the actual project. It's not related to the company that owns the project, and we're trying to avoid dilution of the holding company, the parent. We're trying to avoid dilution of the parent within the context of all of those. So just like we've been really strategic and capital intensive relative to building what we have today, we're extremely focused on minimizing dilution. I'm a large shareholder, so obviously it's important to me personally. And so from that perspective, we're looking at, for instance, I'll put it into context that's real. The BFS is coming. We've already taken a lot of steps relative to targeting entities that can finance that BFS and the structures that will look at, and how we do that to absolutely minimize the equity component, if not take it to zero. And you'll see that. You'll see the benefits of that strategic work that's been done already come after we have the BFS and we go through that period of lining up the financing. We've already targeted these individuals. We have conference calls on a regular basis with the entities that are interested, and we get incoming interest on a regular basis. So our goal on the solar glass plant is to own 100% of it, credit finance it, and debt finance it cleverly using really good terms, and government where we can. And if we do that, the margins will be exceptional. The capex coverage will be the debt coverage will be easy and termed out over an extended period, and we'll get the benefit of a really high EBITDA, even on a conservative multiple. My goal with that solar glass facility is that it warrants a $1 billion valuation when it's in full production.
Brian, quickly, market cap. We know we're on the QB. Market cap, insider ownership, share distribution. How's that on HMR Homerun?
We have a pretty good ownership in the management team. I mean, myself, I'm probably in that 5% fully diluted, maybe 3 to 4%. We've done a really good job of consolidating the ownership over the last 24 months relative to sort of this Lassonde curve that we've been in. So it's been sort of smaller shareholders unloading their shares into the larger recipients of those shares. So the buy side is much more capitalized, I would think, than the sell side. But we're still in that Lassonde curve. We have a $50 million US market cap. We have not issued that many shares in this process. We're still under 100 million shares and really close to that 100 million mark on a fully diluted basis. But that full dilution is bringing in, $20+ million in extra capital already built into that structure through various warrants. We have optioned our key strategic people, so they're beneficiaries of the development of the company. And we've done that, all the way down into the management team in Brazil, which is important. Those are key people, and into Europe. And so we built a lot of leverage into the model, and I think we'll see the benefits of that leverage over the next 24 months. And again, you look at the Lassonde curve. What's the transition point in the Lassonde curve? It's a bankable feasibility study and financing that bankable feasibility study. And then it's a capital bet relative to the timing of cash flow and the risk to the timing of that cash flow. But if you're looking at say a target $1 billion valuation, and you're trading currently at 50 million, and you've got a 36-month timeline, you can actually do that math depending on what your desired rate of return is.
Anyone have any other questions about Homerun Resources? You can check the bottom of your screen, click on the link. HMR is the venture symbol, HMRFF on our QB NASDAQ listing. And Brian, it was an absolute pleasure, and thanks for your time. I really enjoyed talking to you, and we learned a lot about Silica, a lot about Brazil, and a lot about you. And thank you again.
It was really good. I enjoyed that, Darren. Thank you very much for your time.
Me too.
Maybe next time we'll have a glass of wine and make it a little longer.
Absolutely. We'll play with our Lego set. How's that hit you?
Exactly.
All right, right on.